very
That's
nice.
good.
Hey, well, Diane, I think maybe we'll get into it, Because it's
Okay.
one past now, and we've got a few people have joined in, and I'm sure we'll get some more coming along as the time ticks by. So I just wanted to say hello to everyone who's joined in, and thank you very much for joining us, especially those of you in New Zealand. It's 7 a.m. Some of us early risers, some not so much, but yeah, thanks for joining in. And so the background for today is really that, yeah, I've sort of looked a little bit into local currencies, during my time across looking into sustainability, all sorts of sustainability related issues. And I guess because of COVID-19 and especially the sort of impending economic struggles, I guess, that we know we're going to have, just sort of looked into it a lot more deeply. And I really wanted to be able to sort of give some inspiration to people around New Zealand that just because they might not be getting paid the New Zealand dollar or the same amount of the New Zealand dollar as they were previously, doesn't mean that we can't still trade and exchange our skills within our communities. And so, yeah, hoping out of today that talking to Diana, it kind of gives a lot of people some insight into how a local currency could help us recover out of COVID, and yeah, we'll also, maybe help us strengthen our communities and our I guess economies moving forward, and we'll sort of touch into some of those bigger macro sort of topics as well. But that was the main motivation behind today, was just sort of getting, because I talked to a few people. I talked to a friend who's a banker and a friend who's a currency exchange fella, and neither of them had heard anything about local currencies. And so I just think, yeah, I want to get the conversation out there and get more people aware of it, and sort of make sure it's part of the narrative as we look to recover and I think evolve the economy out of COVID. So anyway, that's kind of why we wanted to talk to Diana. And so Diana, if you wanted to maybe just sort of tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Bristol, the Bristol Pound, and maybe just a little backstory of how you got there, and then from there I will show the video to sort of explain what Bristol Pound's about, and then we'll get into some of the questions I've got for you. But yeah, hello.
Okay. Yep, sounds great. So I've been at the Bristol Pound since July 2018. But at that point, the currency had been going about 6 years, and yeah, it had been having probably a couple of years already by then of problems, of usage not continuing to grow, plateauing off, and in fact dipping down a bit. And so they thought, okay, let's have a rethink, let's have a new team, let's try and get another perspective on this. Why did I end up there? Well, I've been working in non-profits nearly all of my adult life. It just seemed to me like I needed to work in something where it wasn't all about making someone else money. It was about, making society better, making the world a better place. So I've worked in a variety of non-profits, some environmental, some to do with carers, people who are looking after someone with a long-term illness or condition, who are, just as a friend or family member looking after them, unpaid. Some in the realms of mental health, and my background especially is finance. And when I was at the environmental charity, I became aware of time banking and currencies at that point. And also concepts such as triple bottom line, the idea that just the money on your balance sheet or your profit and loss account, that isn't really telling you what impact you're having as a company. And so I started to, think about these things. And anyway, the job at the Bristol Pound came up just at the perfect time for me. Yeah. And I was so excited, to get to, work in such an exciting field. And I guess for me, it feels like, I know people say, well, the Bristol Pound, it's teeny tiny. But to me, it feels like this is the most important work of my entire life so far. Because most of the other work that I've done in non-profits has been picking up the pieces, and trying to trying to fix things that have already gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And I figure that the work I'm doing now is working much more upstream. I mean, you've probably heard this thing about, someone fishing out bodies in a river, and, he keeps saying, oh, quick, come help me, there's another body needs pulling out. And you've got all these people trying to pull bodies out of the river. And then someone goes, I'm going to go see who's throwing them in upstream, you know, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like that's where I'm working now. I'm trying to work upstream and trying to,
yeah,
because we're not going to fix the social and the environmental problems until we fix the economy, you know, get
yeah,
that
yeah.
working differently. It's a big job.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, lots of questions I want to dive into, but I think before we go into that, I might just show this video of Bristol Pound so everyone kind of gets a bit of a basis of what it's about, and then if we'll get
Sure.
you to sort of tell us a bit more about it. So hopefully this all works. So I'm just going to share the screen. Um, cool. Is that, you can see that? Um, it, oh,
Not
um,
yet. Yes.
so you're seeing
Yes.
the Bristol Pound website?
Yep.
Yep, cool. Okay, so I'll put that on. And you've got the video in large on your screen?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Chocolate brownies are really popular as well. Well, I think brownie has caught my eye, so I'd like a brownie. Take away, please. You just want to come to the till for me? Can I pay with Bristol pounds, please? Yeah, absolutely. I am. Yep. Just 250, yeah. That's 250 to our tips. It's a very quick and easy transaction. They just come up when someone's got the Bristol Pound app. They just come up, show you that the transaction's been made, and they're away. They've got their cake and they've gone. It did open up a whole world of using local suppliers and supporting local businesses that we continue with today. It encouraged us to look at ways that we could spend that money for the good of the local economy. Bristol Pound is about creating a cohesive community in Bristol. It celebrates the independence and artistic creativity that people of Bristol can bring to a project like this. We are creating a money which circulates within the city, so that instead of wealth leaving the city through distant supply chains and head offices miles away, instead that money can stay in Bristol and benefit small businesses in Bristol. We supply probably the Southwest with all specialist spices, fruit and veg. We are unique in a way that it's still family run. The Bristol Pound is popular in the inner city area, and I think it's best to keep the money where you are. And we buy a lot of locally produced products. The customers like that, and I think they like using the Bristol Pound.
What the Bristol Pound can do is help small businesses to survive and even encourage interactions between one small business and another. So it's keeping the money closer. If businesses are thriving, that means that there are more job options for people like me.
The research we've been doing with the Bristol Pound focuses on the ways in which the pound can help small businesses within the Bristol region, city region economy. One of the things that the research really pushes is the idea of business-to-business relations and supply chains, and thinking about the ways in which the pound can also be used as a particular kind of marketing advantage in selling your business locally.
Really see this as part of a worldwide movement, and Bristol is leading the way.
Very nice. We're back on shared screen. Cool, that all went well. Before we just dive into that, sorry, Diana, I'm just going to let everyone know who's listening in that if you've got questions, obviously that's the whole benefit of having Diana here and doing it through this platform is that you can ask questions. So the Q&A box on your screen there, feel free to jump in with any questions and we'll do our best to answer all of those. I've got lots myself as well, but yeah, just it's that whole sort of interactive thing. So I've also got a poll here that I'm going to try and see if this works. keen to know if people have heard of local currencies before, and if you'd use one, if there was one available. So answer that poll as well, and we'll see how that that goes. So Diana, while they're doing the polling, do you want to maybe just start by giving us a quick overview? I know we just watched that video, but how would you describe what the Bristol pound is? Or no, sorry, I'll say, how would you describe what a local currency is to a 10-year-old? Oh, you're on mute. I'll unmute you.
Thank you. I muted myself during the video because I thought often the sound.
All good.
So I think that one of the first things is that there's no such thing as a local currency, or complementary currency. There are lots of currencies out there the whole time. We might not think of ourselves as using lots of currencies, but if you have some kind of loyalty card for a particular shop, or like a stamp card, so that you get every 10th coffee free, or if you've got air miles because you fly frequently, all these things are currencies. And on the whole, currencies have a few functions. They function as a means of exchange. They function as a store of value. So you've got some points on your card or some New Zealand dollars in your bank, and and the fact that it's a recognized currency, and it means something having that there. You can spend it later, so it allows you to transact not in the moment but later. Yeah, I think different sorts of money are good for different things. So, for example, your loyalty card, that's encouraging you to behave a certain way, and it's rewarding you for that. And if that's something you want to do, that's great. Meanwhile, maybe you're a young parent or a young family, you've got children, and maybe you get together with some neighbors and you decide, oh, we're going to share babysitting. I'll babysit for you, you babysit for me, and maybe you make little bits of paper just to help keep on top of that kind of babysitting circle token. So we're actually playing with currencies, or even just an IOU. You buy my lunch and I'll write you, pay you later, and I write it down on a scrap of paper and give it you, just so that we don't forget about that. And that's all local currencies are trying to do. They're trying to say, what can we do additionally that normal money doesn't do, that's going to help things be a bit better or easier, or encourage certain behavior? Now, oftentimes when local currencies in particular have developed in the past, they've developed at a time of depression or recession, when access to the real money, if you like, is in some way impeded, because the banks aren't lending any money, because no one's got any money and the risks seem too high. And we may well be in a situation like that, as we come out of COVID, because people won't have been earning any money, they haven't got any money in their accounts. The bank's going to say, well, we don't want to lend you any money because you're not being paid at the moment. So there is likely to be that. Now, when the currency is being invented to address a lack of liquidity in the money supply, usually the kinds of currencies that are invented are not like the Bristol pound. The Bristol pound is backed one to one with sterling.
Right.
So each Bristol pound is basically a pound sterling, if you like. It's just a pound sterling with some extra rules and pretty designs,
right.
And a different way of using it. But usually the currencies that get developed to address liquidity problems are not backed with sterling.
Right.
They're just much more based on trust. So examples would be, the Virgil was a very famous one in the 1930s in Austria. It was so good at getting hospitals built, houses built. They moved from huge unemployment to nearly full employment in a matter of, well, a very short period of time, months or a year. But it was so good and so effective that, of course, the local government was very concerned that it was overtaking from their own ability to control the economy, the money supply, and importantly, to raise taxes. So, you often then find that very successful local currencies can get shut down.
Yeah, yeah, right, yeah. It's just, sorry, Diana, to interrupt. Just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on there. I just wanted to
Yeah.
sort of reiterate that point that a currency is it's just about exchanging value, isn't it? So it's just literally, like you said, someone wanting to babysit and someone else, I don't know, with a lawnmower, and they simply just swap. But then the idea is that when you have more and more people or more businesses, that they can actually start not just between trading or exchanging between the two people, they can start exchanging between a group, right? So that's the sort of simplicity of what a currency is, right? And that's what money allows us to do. And an economy is basically humans going about their day and trading their skills and living and sharing resources, right? And I think it's so for me, sort of diving into this and first looking at local currency, it was a bit of a mind-blowing thing. I was like, oh, of course, like we've been so I don't know, primed, if it's not quite the right word, but that to live in this economic system that dominates the world, the sort of capitalist and neoliberalist system, and that for New Zealand, it's a New Zealand dollar, and that's the only way you can kind of exchange. But as you sort of said, there's actually lots of little local currencies here anyway. We have in New Zealand flybys, and we have obviously air miles are another one that jumps to mind, and we do have those kind of coffee or cafe loyalty things. So there are lots of other little currencies going on, and I think a lot of people probably aren't even just aware of that, really. But just that kind of stripping it right back to what it's all about. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is, for me, my understanding of it is that a lot of it comes down to trust, right? It's so if I don't know, sell something for $10 to someone, I'm trusting that $10 bill I'm given is seen as $10 by the next person, right? So can you sort of talk a bit about the importance of trust in the Bristol pound and local currencies?
Yeah, I mean, even just a normal banknote is actually just an instrument of trust, saying, the Bank of England, given that I'm in the UK, promises that this piece of paper is worth 10 quid, basically. So there's always an element of trust. What I would say is that whereas with a fiat currency, a central government produced currency or central bank produced currency, it's everyone will recognize that. Everyone's going to trust it. With a local currency, especially if it's not backed by a currency, there is much more of a trust thing going on.
Right.
I mean, if we think about how the economy developed, let's go back, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 years, where we were operating in small family and tribal groups, maybe. And it was basically a gift and sharing economy. There was no such thing as market, and money wasn't needed. It's like, well, we all work together and we all make sure that everyone is fed and looked after, and then it gradually, came to the stage where now actually this tribe wants to trade with this tribe because they've, developed some skill at, I don't know, growing a certain sort of food, maybe, and we'd like to exchange. And at first it could just be a simple exchange, but the problem is, if actually my crop is at a different time of year to the crop that you're producing, there is a difference in time. There's a time lag, and so you need some way of kind of accounting for that and saying, oh yeah, but I know that in 6 months time you'll give me whatever it is. And so some kind of trust in a record, and different things have been used, everything from, I don't know, shells and not always a precious metal or a special piece of paper with symbol on it. It can be almost anything that says, okay, I know that you'll honor this at a later point in time.
Yeah, cool.
In terms of the Bristol pound, because we're sterling backed, that really made it easier to address that trust thing.
Can you talk to us about the pros and cons of having it backed by the sterling?
So I would say the pros for us was that what we were trying to do at the time was not address a liquidity problem. We were trying to get businesses, local businesses, to trade with each other to keep the money circulating locally, and to encourage people to, you know, to shop with those small businesses, so that some of the money wasn't instantly leaving the city and going to a distant supply chain or a distant head office or shareholders the other side of the world. So we were trying to make sure that we, you know, these were companies that were born and bred in Bristol, if you like, with Bristol shareholders, and so any money that's kept in the system is just going to be reinvested in our city. So,
I just wanted to let you know, sorry to interrupt, but just here in New Zealand, what's come into the news recently, and even on our sort of main news channel last night, was talk about Uber Eats. I'm sure you're familiar with that, and about so they take the 30% cut from you know, cafes and restaurants when they do their order, and there's been a push here in New Zealand for New Zealanders to not go through Uber, right? And I just think that's a really good example to your point that people's money goes, you know, to these, it's supposed to go to these local burger makers or fish and chip stores or whatever, and 30% of it then's going whoosh, off overseas to the US, and then to all these shareholders over there who give no shits whatsoever about what's going on in New Zealand. But it's just a really interesting insight that there's kind of this movement here in New Zealand, which obviously gets me pretty excited, that trying to tell people, hey, where you spend your money matters, how you spend your money, who you give your money to matters, or that great quote, I don't know whoever said it, but you know, every dollar you spend is a vote on the world you want to live in. So I just thought you'd be quite interested to know that. It actually was on our news last night, and it's sort of been doing the rounds on LinkedIn and stuff on the circles I'm in anyway.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the questions coming in.
Yeah.
So the first one says, do you know if there are any local currencies that have gone beyond being backed by the savings put into it, also put a value on actions that create positive community outcomes in the way time banking does, and create more of the currency because of the community value being generated? So yes, I mean, this sounds very much like the kind of thing that in the UK, Hull is developing something called Hull Coin, and Eastbourne is developing something called Bourne Coin. So these are basically green incentive schemes to try and encourage people and reward people for doing good, you know, for doing things which are going to help the environment or help society or whatever. And I'm very interested in that, and so no doubt we'll come on at some point to where Bristol Pound is going. So I've mentioned that Bristol Pound perhaps hasn't been doing as well as we might have hoped, and that's why I was brought in. So you might wonder how far I've got, you know, getting on for 2 years down the line.
Yes.
And how did we manage to get that by sterling? Well, the answer is, you know, that's just the mechanism. It was a choice near the beginning. So when you're designing a currency, first thing you think is, you know, how do we invent the currency? How does it come into existence? And the way the Bristol Pound comes into existence is at the point you buy some Bristol Pounds with sterling, the sterling that you use to buy them goes into the kind of backing account, if you like, and then, you know, then you've got your pound sterling, your Bristol Pounds that are completely backed by sterling. So that's how the money is issued.
Yeah.
I could choose to issue the money on the basis of nothing at all, just make it up and give people Bristol Pounds. They'd be unlikely to trust it. And I think as well, you have to be a bit careful when you're working with complementary currencies that aren't backed by anything or limited by anything, because you can quickly get hyperinflation. You know, you can quickly get far too much money in the system, because everyone's like, what? Like imagine that babysitting circle that I was just explaining earlier on. You know, like maybe you go, okay, here we are, a group of 10 friends. We're going to start off with 10 tokens, one each. Yeah, we've all got one token each. And so the maximum someone can do is, you know, they can be babysat for 10 times, and then they're going to have to babysit for other people, because otherwise this scheme is going to fall apart. Yeah. But if actually that person just goes, do you know, I'll just write more and more tokens. I'll just, you know, make as many tokens as I like. You know, okay, they're going to get babysat for, you know, every week forever, but it doesn't work. You know, it's like no one else is getting babysat for. Where are all the tokens? You know, so you have to be a little bit careful with the supply of money if it's not backed by anything. But I certainly think that if it's a liquidity problem you're trying to solve, then probably a non-backed currency has more value than a backed one.
the non-backed ones, is that more what you'd call a local exchange trading system, or LETs? Is that
Yes,
sort of the
so I
major
think it could
difference?
be a let's. That tends to be more of a community thing. So,
Yep.
you know, as you say, you know, Sheila cuts hair and Bob has got an unused lawnmower and Peter is growing stuff on his allotment, and, you know, we all share stuff around and we're using tokens to facilitate that. But there are other things like mutual credit, which tends to be much more of a business thing where, okay, I'm a business, I can't afford to buy anything at the moment because I've got no low liquidity, no money in my bank account, and the bank doesn't want to give me a loan. But I've made friends with this other firm, and I know they need this, and they also know this other person needs that. And actually, we can just do a deal and say, you know what? No money needs to move move between accounts here. I'll do this for you. You do that for them. They'll do that for me. We'll all have to put it through our books, because a transaction has taken place, and that, you know, if we're not careful, we're going to get done for VAT fraud or something.
Right.
So it's not a way round taxation usually, the way most tax laws are written, but it is a way around that liquidity problem. If small businesses in particular are having a problem getting access to cash.
Yeah, right. Okay. So could an example be, say, I'm just thinking about cafes or something being, you know, providing a free coffee every morning or a couple of free coffees every day for someone to come in and, I don't know, clean their windows, or someone to come in and play some music to entertain the crowd, that kind of thing. So they don't have the cash so much, but they've got another way of exchanging value. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
I've just, before you jump into those questions, Diana, someone's just sent one onto the chat as well. So Tim, just so Diane can see these questions as well, just moving forward, put your questions into the Q&A box on the bottom there, but I'll just ask his question to you, Diana.
Yeah.
So is geography/proximity used to restrict the use of a local currency?
So it is in the case of the Bristol pound, and for most currencies that are local rather than other sorts of complementary currency, because, you know, there certainly can be other types than local. So for example, in the Bristol pound backing is done through the local credit union, and credit unions in this country have to have, oh God, I've forgotten the exact term, a common bond. There has to be a common bond. And so our local credit union has said the common bond is you have to have a BS postcode. So the postcode, you know, a little bit of the address that goes on the end, and, you know, like BS 159AB or whatever. Anyone with a BS postcode can open a Bristol pound account, or any business that local independent business that has a BS postcode can as well. We have stretched that slightly for some businesses. So for example, there are some farms that serve the Bristol area, but clearly they're in the surroundings of Bristol, and some of them are just outside the Bristol postcode area, but they're very, you know, we absolutely want to encourage food coming from, let's say, 30 miles away, even if it's outside the, you know, the BS postcode area, it's still local. So we've had to come to special arrangements with the credit union here and there to let some businesses like that join the scheme.
Do you think on that, I'm on the board of trustees at a community garden here, or we're trying to change the terminology, but more to urban farms. And I know there's a few people who are listening in who are involved with other urban farms around Auckland. There's a real push and movement to grow food in the city, perfect city to do it. But what I wanted to ask, are there particular businesses or products or skills that are more valued or more necessary, especially starting out in a local currency? Like food growing, obviously for me, everybody has to eat, right? So yes, are they organisations?
I would say that the food economy in Bristol has been one of the areas where it has really worked quite well. You know, so you have cafes and restaurants and bars that are buying food from local producers of, I don't know, anything from peanut butter to you know, brownies to vegetables grown nearby, and including within the city boundary. But you need a variety if you really want the circulation to work, because at some point, you know, there'll be a load of bills that people have that they think, well, I can't pay these in Bristol pounds because I'm having to get my, I don't know, my seeds or my whatever, I don't know, whatever it might be, from elsewhere, pay my electric bills and, you know. And so in fact, what tends to work is having as wide a range as possible. So we've got office suppliers, we've got accountants and lawyers, we've got, I don't know, trying to think, IT suppliers,
Yep.
we've got wood recycling, we've got, plumbers and builders, we've got cleaners, we've got, so the more rich that is, it's helping people have ways to spend their Bristol pounds. So, we felt early on it was really important to try and encourage a wide mix. But in terms of where that circulation works best, I would say that probably food is, or at least one of the areas where we've got greatest coverage.
Yeah, cool. Food. I've got two quick questions before we dive into everyone else. Sorry, everyone, but this is the beauty about being the host. You get to ask the questions of everyone else. But so one question was, what do you think is kind of the critical mass of having enough businesses and people involved to kind of make it work? And two, how many, are you aware within Bristol, how many people are getting paid their wages in the Bristol pound? And is it 100% in the Bristol pound, or is it often that it's 20%, 50%? So, yeah.
So I think these days the answer is very few people are getting paid in Bristol pounds, and those that are, they're probably getting 50 quid or 100 quid of their wages in Bristol pounds maximum, because they want to be able to use it and spend it. And realistically, a lot of the Bristol pound spend for most people is just their entertainment. So so I think it is tricky, and as I mentioned, and I think we will need to explore this at some point. It hasn't all worked as we would have liked, and that's why we're looking to change things for the future. What was the first part of your question again?
It was about, was there a critical mass to start?
Oh, yeah.
In terms of.
So I think that near the beginning, getting that marketing message out there was important, and I think we were really helped by the fact that there was a newly appointed mayor, the first ever mayor of Bristol, in 2012, and he was an architect, very alternative, very creative, and he just embraced the Bristol pound. So it was really thanks to him that the council got so involved with it, and he took 100% of his salary in Bristol pounds. Wow. And so those sorts of things made a big boost, and meant that we grew very quickly. But I would say that you don't have to have 2,000 members like we do to have a local currency. I mean, a lot of the schemes that have been successful and long running in this country, places like Lewes and Totnes, that are little tiny market towns, really. And they're small. I don't know, like 10-20,000 people or something. They're not large areas. They've got one little high street, and and they get the local businesses to participate, and they're usually volunteer-run schemes, and they're usually totally paper schemes with no digital money at all.
Right.
So I think there are just different. You can flex this, to fit the local need. There's no one size fits all for any currency.
Yeah, right. Okay. I would want to ask some of these questions. So, yeah, you kind of touched on it from Jess already about how the Bristol pound managed to get backed by the sterling. I sort of wanted just to link that in with what you just talked about there with the mayor taking his salary in it. Were there other crucial kind of wins that really sort of, I guess, as you said, we want to talk about some of its failings too, but were there other kind of key moments like that really cemented the growth or the success of Bristol pound to date?
I think one of the things was that Bristol was the Bristol Green Capital. I guess it's a kind of European thing in 2015. So that gave it another big boost. And throughout that, 2012, 2013, 2014, in the run-up, it was just, we were riding the crest of a wave. It wasn't just us that were pushing in this direction. It was, we picked up on the zeitgeist. So I think we were partly lucky. I mean, the other thing is that the marketing we did was great at growing that initial tribe of followers and stuff. But the bad thing about it was that our marketing was very kind of campaigning. It was very pro this and anti that. Oh, you must, shop with small businesses. It's very important. And, those big evil companies are dreadful and you mustn't shop with them. And we used a lot of language about local multiplier effect and it was very exclusive. Actually, we did some work on 2016 to see who are our individual members, and 18% of our members have PhDs. That it's not a typical crowd. We were preaching to the converted. We were really talking to people who already thought just like us. So we got all them. They all joined pretty quickly. But if you're a mother of 3 with half an hour to do the shopping on a Friday afternoon and a very limited budget, you're not going to be going around 6 shops when you could do it all in Tesco's and pay over the odds for the pleasure. You're just going to get on with it and do the shopping locally. And we don't need to make people feel bad about having to live pragmatically in the real world. We all wish the world was a bit different, but actually this is how it is and this is how people are coping. And we managed to alienate all those people. At best we seemed completely irrelevant to them. At worst, it seemed like we were being judgmental about their behavior. So, I don't think we helped ourselves, although it got us off the ground quickly, it didn't help us really grow to scale.
Yeah, right. And so is that maybe a good segue into what you're wanting to do, or the sort of improvements you're wanting to make? And I know that you've got a big kind of new direction or pivot that Bristol Pound's about to undergo.
So let me just run over the 3 main problems that we had. So the first one I've already explained was the kind of marketing, the tone of voice was limiting us. The second problem was that we didn't really have a great business model. If you're starting up a business, these days the first thing you do is you download a business model canvas, off the internet, and you start to work out, okay, what are my customer segments? And then for each customer segment, what's the value proposition, so that each of those customer segments are going to go, oh yeah, well, I want a bit of that. That's great. And we didn't have any of those value propositions. The only thing we were trying to solve was this systemic thing that's way up here out of sight that no one knows anything about. And and actually when I was saying to people, come and join the Bristol Pound, they would go, well, what's in it for me? And I'd say, just a kind of warm glow, that you're doing a nice thing. There was no real benefit in it for any body in particular to get involved. And on top of that, our tech was so clunky that in fact it costs us money every time someone spends money in Bristol Pounds. Far from the more money that gets spent in Bristol Pounds, the more money we make as an organisation. No, we just don't have, because we're not operating at big enough scale, we were never able to do, to address that. So we had this rubbish business model that meant we were constantly reliant on grant funding. And grant funding, 6 years into a project, it's very hard to say, oh, this is brand new and exciting, fund us. People expect you to have got that kind of stuff sorted by 6 years in. And another problem was that because we had decided to back the currency, and so we had got Cyclos, which runs, it's the same software that runs like the Sardex mutual credit scheme, and we decided that was a really good front end for people, so that you could pay member to member, and that was a really nice front end. But we had to have a back end with the sterling backing, and that had to be in a regulated body, because as soon as you're working with real money and you've got individuals and businesses, you've got to be approved by the local regulatory frameworks. So the credit union, as well as offering that sterling backing, they were the regulated body for the Bristol Pounds, and still are. But that meant they owned all the transaction data. Right. So I was thinking when I joined the Bristol Pound, well, this is quite easy. I'll find out who's not spending the Bristol Pounds and they're just sitting on them in their business accounts, and I will pick up the phone to them and I'll say, Also, you're not spending your Bristol pounds, you know, who can I introduce you to? You know,
Yeah.
maybe there's a supplier I could introduce you to and you could start to get that money moving.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could do some press releases saying, hey, last month, this is our #1 Bristol pound user. I'm not allowed any of that data. And
No,
as
no.
well, and this answers another question that's popped up there, and I've answered how we're funded as well, which is, you know, out of goodwill at the moment. Do we have demurrage, which is, I don't know if all of your viewers will understand this.
Yeah,
but
no,
the
I had to
idea
quickly Google what that meant.
well, demurrage is basically negative interest. So we're all very used to this paradigm where if we've got some money, we put it in the bank as savings and they say, thank you very much for putting your savings with us. And they give us some interest. So our money accrues in value while it's sitting in the bank. And the reason it does that is because the bank is busy going, okay, I'll take that money that Diana has put in her bank account and I'll lend it to these people and those people, and they'll be paying me interest on that money because it's a debt. And so to say thank you to Diana for letting me use her money to make these other loans, I'll give her a bit of interest on top of that. But it's a very weird thing because it encourages, instead of for money to circulate, you know, I think we agreed earlier on, you know, really the purpose of money is to enable exchanges. You know, that's really what it's there for. And so the idea of a store, you know, encouraging you not to spend it is a bit of a weird thing to do. And especially the idea of a store of something which gets more valuable. I mean, that's just not like real life things. You know, in real life, if I spend lots of money on a car, you know, I've got £25,000, I'm going to spend it on a car. You know, the moment I've driven that car home, it's just going to start to deteriorate. And, you know, if I don't drive it, well, it deteriorates even quicker. You know, it loses value. Same if I don't know, have a load of, I don't know, corn grain or something, and I've kept it in my barn and I'm thinking, oh, I'll wait for it to get bigger. Well, it won't get bigger. You know, actually the mice will get at it and some of it will go off and it has a limited time span.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the idea of demurrage is to make money more like normal assets. Normal assets deteriorate.
Right.
Normal assets, we need to use them and we should want to use them. You know, and for me, one of the things which is sick in our society is this idea that there are people who can just hoard money, you know, and get richer and richer and get more and more powerful. And then thanks to having loads of money, they get even richer again. You know, it's just, there's something deeply wrong, I think, with, you know, morally perhaps, but certainly just from a systemic point of view.
Yeah.
In
I couldn't agree more.
What that's doing.
Did you see the research from Oxfam? I think it came out last year that I think it's 8 men have the same wealth as half the world's population. So
Yeah,
3.5 billion people. Like, if that's not an example of how fucked the system is, I don't know what is. 8 men,
exactly.
3.5 billion people. And that's that hoarding, right? That you talked about. Yeah, it was quite.
And it gives them too much power. It's not even just about sorry, I've just seen this little flash up on the screen. I agree, it is disgusting, whoever just wrote that. It's also the power it gives them. I mean, those big companies, they have more power than national governments. They get to sue national governments that interfere with their profits. They get to lobby not just governments, but they are heavily lobbying at UN level, at WHO level, at, you know, all of these big international bodies that we think should be there working for good to come up with global solutions. They're being lobbied constantly and even, you know, funded by major corporations, and we should all be quite worried about that.
And a lot of these, you just made me think too about tax havens, right? A lot of these, going back to Uber, like we talked about with the Uber Eats thing, they're an example who have got their banking, central banking, and some, I don't know exactly where it is, but somewhere like the Cayman Islands, where they're paying next to nothing in terms of tax. And and you know, the amount of tax Uber pay in New Zealand is just a joke. I think it's a couple of thousand or something. Like, it's phenomenally low. And when, especially when you think that they make money from using our infrastructure, so from using our roads, which is what, you know, Kiwi workers have to pay the tax and pay tax on petrol to be able to have the roads. Uber come in, take the money, take 30% out of the fare, and then it goes offshore and into a tax haven somewhere else. Yeah, pretty broken system. Hey, I just wanted to
no, I
quickly.
agree. And my other problem with things like that kind of, Uber Eats type thing is I think a lot of the workers who are doing the deliveries are paid, through the gig economy. They have very little workers' rights, very little control over their lives, and are paid, appallingly low wages often. So, I think there are huge problems with the way we've allowed our economy to develop.
So
shall I go back to, so I've gone over the problems with the Bristol pound.
yes.
Shall I come up with some of the, what
Yeah, I was
what
just about to ask, and also how you sort of think the COVID impact on it all as well. Sort of, you could link it back into kind of the changing scape from COVID, the vid around the world.
Okay, I'll start off with the kind of broader ideas that predated COVID. So there I was thinking, how do I fix these three big problems? The marketing problem, and the business, getting the money to circulate better, because it hasn't been. And by the way, I didn't mention a whole load of the problems around. We had assumed that businesses, if they had money in Bristol pounds, well, they would just change their supply chains. But that isn't how businesses make decisions. They don't make decisions based on, oh, look, I've got some money in that account. I'll go and look in this directory listing and pick at random another supplier. They go with the people they know and trust. And it's quite difficult to change the behavior. Plus the bookkeeping is a nightmare when you're using more than one payment system. And so there was all of that, plus the technical problems with the actual infrastructure and how costly and glitchy it was. And I'd come up with some ways of how we could start to address these, but I kept thinking, actually though, if I was starting from scratch now, would I be reinventing the Bristol pound? Is that the biggest problem, that Bristol has today in terms of the environment and the economy? Is the biggest problem, oh, well, not enough people are supporting local businesses. And if lots of people were, would that fix some of the bigger problems, like the move to zero carbon? And like, I don't know, our problem with adult social care? Well, it might help a little bit if there was a bit less transport going on, because Bristol was more able to meet its own needs with a kind of local circular economy. But actually, no, I mean, the move to zero carbon is something much bigger. It's all of us and lots of businesses, all businesses changing their behavior to make different choices. And other problems like adult social care. This needs a rebuilding of community infrastructure, which has been eroded as the state has stepped in, basically. And that was fine all the time that was working, but now there isn't the money for the state to carry on stepping in at that level. We have to rebuild the kind of infrastructure in communities that there used to be, 50 years ago when I was a kid. And so I started to think, okay, what could we do differently? And the answer is we could do quite a lot differently, because back in 2012, when we started, we were trapped with, if we were going to be dealing with real money, we had to be regulated. We had to have the money stored in a bank account and all of this. Now there is something called electronic money institution regulation. So this is regulation of electronic money outside the banking system.
Right.
And
Bitcoins, etc.
Well, Bitcoins are cryptocurrency. That's kind of slightly different, and they tend to not need electronic money institution regulation, because they're operating outside the kind of national borders, and they're not on the whole being used for legitimate trade. Okay. So that there aren't consumers and business. Yeah, I don't know. It seems to be a different thing. It's not like you go to the shop and you pay in Bitcoins.
Yeah.
So that's different again. But things like PayPal, which are e-wallet systems, where you can easily pay each other, and that money doesn't hit the bank until you withdraw it. It just goes from one PayPal account to another PayPal account. It doesn't hit the banking system till you withdraw money or load money into it. And so we were thinking, okay, we could make the most of that e-money framework to create a payment platform for the whole of Bristol. It's not just limited to, or it won't be just limited to, little independent businesses. The idea would be to operate a local currency at scale across the whole, not currency, a local payment platform at scale across the whole city, and capture as much of the transactions as possible for two reasons. One, that way we can get some kind of economy of scale with a peer-to-peer platform that we've never been able to get with the Bristol pound. And once we are able to operate in that long-term financially sustainable way, and maybe even make some surpluses which we could reinvest, because we're a non-profit, in local environmental and social projects, actually that's doing a good thing. It's a different sort of keeping the money local. It's not keeping all of the money local, but at least it's keeping the transaction charges local, that currently are all going off through Google Pay and Apple Pay and PayPal, to a few square miles in California. Instead, actually, we could keep that money within Bristol doing good here. So once we've got that kind of payment platform for the financial transactions, which is running itself on that same platform, given that we're aiming to get every Bristol resident and every Bristol business on there, on that same platform, we could run some tokens. And I mentioned earlier on Hull Coin and Born Coin, that are these kind of token systems to incentivize going greener lifestyles, or looking after your neighbor, or enabling lets and time banking schemes, like the kind of babysitting circle that I was mentioning earlier. Actually we could do all of that on this platform as well, and start to develop something alongside the market economy. So I don't know if any of you listening have read Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, but she describes how really, we've just been focusing on the market economy as though that's the only thing. But there was always a balanced economy before. There's the family, which we've always recognized. There was the commons, where there was common pasture grazing and all of that kind of thing for the animals of the village. And and the commons is alive and well, actually, especially on the internet. And you've got the market, and you've got so you've got different sorts of things. And actually what's gone wrong is that we've put too much into the market economy at the expense of everything else, which has been undervalued and made invisible in effect. We think of traditional women's work as being unpaid work in the home, cooking and cleaning and all of that sort of stuff, caring for older relatives. All of that has just been undervalued because it's not in the market economy. The answer is not to put it all in the market economy. The answer is to try and bring some kind of balance, so that it's not all about the market. So I'm very interested in thinking how we can use a token scheme to develop more of a sharing, more of a gift economy. And some of those tokens might be things you can exchange. Say, you've given me some potatoes from your allotment, and then later on, I'll cut your hair. Or was that the right way around? Yes, that was the right way around. No, I've lost it now. I've got so wound up with who's cutting whose hair that I've completely...
No, it's really great. It's really great. I just wanted to touch on why you were talking there, the kind of the importance of the contactlessness nature of that, because obviously with the COVID thing, and people being pretty nervous about touching things, and we're being encouraged here to use all contactless payments, and the most common one is for people to do bank transfers, or as you touched on, the likes of Apple Pay or your touch cards. I'm sure you've got those over in the UK as well. So do you think, that's obviously quite a crucial part?
It is a big one. And in fact, we've just put in, sorry, I think I've talked over you, sorry. We've just put in a bid to a grant scheme for post-COVID recovery, led by the UK government. And we've put in a bid for specifically around that cashless thing. So I think something which might be fairly unique to the UK is that it's quite difficult to open a bank account here. To open a bank account, because of banking regulation, you've got to first of all prove that you are who you say you are. And given that we don't have any identity cards in this country, usually people have to show something like a driver's license. Well, if you're poor, you probably haven't got a car and a driver's license. A passport. Well, if you're poor, you probably don't go abroad and you probably haven't forked out for a passport. Maybe a utility bill. Well, if you live in multiple occupancy, you know, you probably haven't got any utility bills in your own name. And so actually a lot of people can't, you know, they're completely excluded from digital money.
Right.
And so we've put in a whole bid saying with this e-wallet scheme, because it's regulated as an electronic money institute rather than as a bank, we're allowed to have what's called proportionate know your customer. So for a very low value account with not too much money going through it, we can have, you know, it might be enough to be registered with a doctor, or registered with a homeless charity or a refugee charity or something for you to, you know, have your basic e-wallet. But then if you're cycling a lot of money through that wallet, well, then you might need to prove yourself a bit more with some other kind of know your customer. So we're doing some consultation at the moment, especially with groups representing disadvantaged people, to try and, you know, flesh out what that needs to look like. But absolutely, I mean, if we're going to build a fairer economy going forwards, we can't have a bunch of people who are just excluded from digital money.
Yes.
I mean, there's quite a movement to try and protect cash in the UK. And I understand that, and it's going to be necessary for a while. But actually, you know, cash is not all good. We have a lot of high value notes, £50 notes in the UK. If you look at the value of cash out there that has been issued by the Bank of England, the vast majority of the value is in £50 notes. And that money is not being used by, you know, individuals to go do their shopping on the whole. That money is mainly used in the grey and black economy, which earns no taxes for the government and doesn't help us pay for our services. It's used, you know, primarily, as I say, for people trying to either do stuff that's illegal or avoid paying their taxes. So
Yeah,
I
good
have
point.
no particular...
That was just a
Sorry,
really
carry
interesting
on.
point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, how those higher value notes actually are paying for, you know, and hindrance to people on lower incomes with lower wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually what we need to do is make digital currency available for everybody such that they don't need to be trapped in cash, and then we can get rid of cash and you know, deal a blow to the black economy.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I just popping up the questions again. I saw one from Sam here. Are you aware of any work to look at combining local currencies with a universal basic income?
Wow, I mean, yes. So in Barcelona, they have done exactly that. So the local government decided to, and they've been doing the same in South Korea as well, actually.
Right.
So issuing through municipalities a local basic income to, you know, people in deprived neighborhoods, but that money is in a local currency that can only be spent in local shops. So yes, those experiments have definitely been done. It's not something that I can do because you know, I don't have any power to distribute a universal basic income. I don't have that money. I mean, I guess if we were non-sterling backed, we could maybe issue a load of, you know, tokens that were, you know, worthless, if you like, to people, and encourage them, you know, try and get traders on board to accept them for various things. But I think it's quite tricky to do that with a non-backed currency, because what is the business getting out of it if they can't use them to trade on? Or if they can use them to trade on, then immediately they're going to have to pay tax on those sales, because it becomes an exchange of value that we picked up by you know, by the revenues and customs authorities over here. So I think it can only really work if it's the local government that says, right, we're going to spend some money on this and we're going to give everyone a basic income. Otherwise, who's going to fund this?
Right. I've had a message sent to me privately by Nonta. Hi Nick, I'm curious about regulations around taxes with local currencies. Any chance you could ask Diana to talk about this? Yeah, if there's enough time. So yeah, just on the time, everybody, we'll probably just go another 5 minutes. Yeah, so any more questions? Yeah, just around taxes.
Well, this is a very tricky one, and in fact, it's on my list of things to do. There are two big bits of research I want to do. One of which is really looking at some of the behavioral stuff around tokens and how we can encourage people to do good without turning everything into a market economy and taking away those altruistic and intrinsic motivations and making everything extrinsic, which again, if you read Kate Rowell's book, it makes me very anxious. But the second bit is all about that fiscal treatment of tokens. Now, usually with lets and time banking, it doesn't interact with businesses. It just stays in the local community.
Right.
And basically it doesn't touch taxes at all. And with mutual credit, which is all in businesses, it does completely fall into tax, because it's an exchange of a recognized business product or service, and it has to be accounted for. You can't just go, no, I gave it away for free, oh, and I got this other stuff for free. You have to put it through your books.
Okay.
So you might cheat and not do it, but mutual credit, like Sardex and stuff, anything that goes through there, you would really have to account for it properly. So the thing that I'm trying to invent, if you like, as part of this Bristol Pay, Mark II Bristol Pound, is that the tokens that are on the same platform as the sterling transactions, I want them to interact in some ways. So I want, for example, if the local council says, oh, thank you for taking your reusable coffee cup or water bottle, Diana, I'll give you a token to reward you for doing that. I want for that token to be able to, I go to a local shop and they say, oh, you've got a token, we'll give you a little discount off your shopping. Right. And then I want those businesses to be able to use those tokens with the council to kind of close the loop, so that you've got a circulation back to the council. And I was thinking, the obvious thing is they get a little discount off their business rates if they're, helping with this token scheme.
Right.
And maybe they would have to be registered as a sustainable business, in order to be an acceptor of tokens.
Yeah.
But the tax regulation around that is very difficult, because they will say, even if you said the token was only worth 0.01 of a penny, which is how a lot of these reward schemes,
right.
For like what did you call them? Flybys.
Flybys we've got, yeah.
Yeah. So probably your flybys, if you look at them, they're probably worth 0.001 of a cent or something.
Okay.
But actually, they, at the point at which they're exchanged for goods and services, they have to be accounted for as if they're worth something.
Right.
So the shop is still having to pay, sales tax on that, and still having to report on it, apparently, on those sales. I don't know enough about this. And the reason is that they're then interacting with the flyby organization, who is, giving them back money for those tokens. So they actually do have a real value at that point. So although they don't have a value to the customer other than you save them up and you get a discount, you can't extract them to cash. You can't do what you like with them. They're not like real money. Their face value is tiny, but they do still have a fiscal thing. So I'm trying to find a good tax lawyer who can help me. There must be a good one. These tax lawyers, they spend all day helping rich people get off paying their taxes. I just want a tax lawyer who's going to work with me on some case law and say, how could we use some tokens? Because if I'm a business, I'm allowed to give away something. Someone could come in and he says, I'm sorry, I haven't got enough money for a cup of coffee. And I can see he's a down and out, and I can say, that's okay, have a cup of coffee on the house. I'm allowed to do that. I don't have to ring that through the till. So, how can I have it both ways?
Yeah, I wish I could help. But you're the expert in this conversation, Diana.
Well, sadly I'm not. I'm trying to find a really good UK tax lawyer who can help me find a way through this, so that we don't, because the last thing I want is for these tokens to have a face value such that people that are on benefits or poor, might count against their benefits, or it might make them have to pay more tax.
Yeah, right.
And equally, I don't want businesses who are doing a great thing saying, hey, thanks for doing a nice thing for the community. I'll reward you, I don't want them having to pick up an extra tax bill
Yeah.
that they don't have the cash to pay for
Yeah,
because they've done a nice thing, you know.
Yeah.
So there must be a way through this.
Yeah, and it just makes sense to me, like for councils and also for governments, like trying, especially to shift to the, you know, carbon zero economy, and to shift to circular economies and stuff. If they could reward businesses that are taking those steps, that are doing initiatives or, you know, undertaking or circular economy type business models. So it makes a lot of sense that, you know, I was just thinking like here in Auckland, the council were trying to go to zero waste. You know, if they knew a business was, I don't know, not selling or not giving away coffee cups, for example, that helping the council to their goals. So yeah, they could give the business
get rewarded. Exactly.
Yeah. Hey, I hate to do this because I'm really enjoying the conversation and I feel like there's so much more to talk about, but I'm just conscious of everyone's time, and especially yours. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Just wanted to say thank you so much for your time and talking to us.
No
And if people did have other questions, or if anyone knows a really good tax lawyer in the UK, are you happy for them to contact you? And if so,
yeah, of course. Yeah. So my email is Diana, DIANA .Finch, FINCH @BristolPound, all one word, .org. That's
Cool.
diana.finch@bristolpound.org.
Awesome. I was just going to quickly share the poll. I forgot to do that.
Oh yeah.
So this share results. So this was the poll. So 75%, 12 out of our 16 who did it said they'd heard of it before, of a currency, and 94% they would be happy to use it, just the one not, which is good. Independent, you know, be your own person. But that's positive that yeah, people are kind of keen to get into this stuff. I guess it's worth noticing the crowd probably who come into these kind of things, who are probably a little bit more forward thinking and keen to create change. But yeah, interesting little snapshot there. Cool. So yeah, thank you very much, Diana. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this platform, and thank you all for your engagement and your questions. And if any of you go on to set up schemes like this, very good luck. I mean, this is, you know, we're all experimenting here, and at some point someone will get it right, and we'll be able to change the world and make it better, because you know, this is urgent. You know, we all have to try and fix this urgently. And
to that point, I really love a quote. I'm going to not get it right, but it was something along the lines of, you know, the person who invented the light bulb did it underneath candlelight, you know, and the person who invented the combustion engine, you know, used to ride a bike to work or whatever. So the point being that you have to work within your kind of current system and the current technologies and everything you've got to develop the future and develop a better system, right? So yeah, I think that's a nice way to sort of sum that up.
And then I just want to finish with another one, which is, once you've had that idea, selling it is very difficult. So, you know, I think it was Ford, you know, had said something like, you know, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yes.
You know, there was no concept of what else there was. So we have to find ways of talking about this once we've had our great idea to get it adopted, and it's quite tricky because it's outside people's paradigms.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, fantastic. And all the best with the work you're doing at the moment. And I just had a thought too, like for people to get onto the website, there's lots of information on there, and maybe sign up to your newsletter and follow you on social media just to keep up to date with your guys' developments, because you're very much leading the way in this space. And so thank you for all the work you're doing. It is incredibly valuable, and not just in Bristol in your own little community, but also it's impacting us over here in New Zealand, and I'm sure other people all around the world. So thank you for all you're doing.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for having me.
Brilliant, Diana. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.